Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today's video is going to be a shop preview and a pattern haul. I'm going to be going through all of the size 10 and 12 women's patterns that came in a New York pattern lot that I bought recently. I have a video that shows some of the organization process of this lot. It was absolutely massive. I think there were over 500 patterns in total, and I've been slowly getting them listed over the last couple of weeks and months. There have been a lot of duplicate patterns, so it's easiest for me to get all of the listings saved as drafts before I start posting any. But since there were so many patterns to list, it has been quite a process. But I'm finally ready to start publishing some of those listings, so I figured I would go through and do some hauls size by size, both so we can admire these designs together and also so you can get a little preview if you're interested in purchasing any of them. Sorry for my dog chewing on a bone in the background. That is annoying, but at least she's not howling, which is the alternative. I don't know if I said, but I'm going to be listing these in order of size, and we'll be starting with the smallest sizes, which are sizes 10 and 12. Now these are for 28 and 30-inch busts, so they are super teeny tiny, but there are some people out there that are that small and they need patterns too. So though these patterns won't personally work for me or the majority of people, I do hope you will enjoy going through them with me today and we can admire the designs together and maybe get some inspiration in terms of garments we want to make and add into our own wardrobes. So let's get into it. Since these have already been listed, they have been pinned to plastic sleeves, so I apologize for any reflections, but I do have my overhead lights off, so hopefully it won't be too bad. And right here we have a worse for wear envelope for a really lovely maternity pattern. So this is a wrap style dress, but it also comes with a smock pattern, and I'm assuming the dress is adjustable in order to suit an expanding waistline, which is really nice whether you're pregnant or not. These smock patterns are pretty typical for vintage maternity patterns, so it's nice to see the dress option, which is a little bit sleeker. This is actually a repeat, which is why it has an R sticker on it. So I have listed and sold this pattern in a size 13, and I actually had this in a larger size too, but decided to keep it for myself. It's a really great scoop neck cap sleeve blouse pattern, and then it's got this tiered ruffly skirt. This one is a really worse for wear envelope. I don't think this is mold, I think this is just water damage. It seems like the smaller sizes and the kids patterns were at the bottom of the bin and seem to get the most damaged from storage, whereas the larger sizes that were towards the top of the bin have fared a bit better, which is good for me because those are the sizes I'm keeping for myself. This is a really great waist length swing coat pattern with some darts over the shoulder to shape it. It's got a collar and a lapel it can turn out, and it's got long sleeves with optional very large cuffs and pockets. And I'm not going to mention the state of these patterns because they are all factory folded, new old stock. I'm also not going to mention the brand because they're all New York pattern. This is a really nice Dolman sleeve shirtwaist or shirt dress that buttons down to the waist. You can make this with a flip out very large collar or with a standing mandarin collar. It has this yoke placket detail, which is really cool because you can make it out of contrasting fabric, as they've shown. You can also make this with very large optional pockets. This dress is similar in terms of the color scheme of the illustration, but very different otherwise. This is a double-breasted button front dress pattern, which I actually like a lot. The skirt is flared lightly and it's shaped with tucks at the waist, and those tucks are parallel to tucks on the bodice that provide this sort of flouncy effect. So that's a nice little detail. And it looks like this one has Dolman sleeves as well, where the sleeves are cut in one with the bodice panels. This is a lovely halter style top with a keyhole neckline and a collar. And it's got darts extending down from the collar to provide volume to the bust, and then it has darts underneath the bust as well. And this is paired with either a partial or full flared circle skirt. This one looks familiar, so this might be a repeat too. I love this pattern. If it was in my size, I'd keep it for myself. This has those Dolman or raglan sleeves again, but has a low V-neck, and you have an optional ruffle to go around that neckline. And you've also got that V shape mimicked in these pockets, which are triangular. And if I was making this, I'd be highly tempted to add like circular appliques above the pockets and then make the pockets out of brown fabric so it looks like you have ice cream cones coming out of them. So if you buy that, you should do that. It's a little tacky, but it's also a really fun idea if I do say so myself. This is another maternity pattern, and this is more in line with typical vintage maternity patterns. This one's probably for the early 40s, I would say, and you just have that relatively fitted skirt with an adjustable waistline, and then this smock top to go over top of it with pockets and a button down front, and a yoke and collar, which you can make out of contrasting fabric. This is a suit or two-piece dress. I can't tell how it is described because the tissue is covering the back of the envelope, but this has double darts on both sides to provide some shaping. It's got a full flared skirt, and then it's got little cap sleeves or short sleeves and either a square neckline or a lapel/collar combo depending on your preference. This envelope is very worse for wear, but I believe the tissue and the instructions and everything were all in great shape. This is another slightly damaged envelope, but this is a lovely dress. I was gonna say this is an ill-fitting dress. That's not what I meant. This is a relatively boxy dress that's then cinched in at the waist using a belt. It's got an overlapping yoke to create a V-neck. There are gathers coming down from the yoke, and then once the waistline is cinched in, it creates a gathered effect above and below it as well. And this has a very large pocket, so very practical, easy, and I imagine very comfortable dress. And it would also be very adjustable since the shaping is very much defined by the size of belt that you use. This is one of my favorites. This has raglan sleeves and a bunch of decorative top stitching. It has darts extending outward from the neckline, and then it has a V-neck and a few different color options. It buttons down the front, and it has little pleats over the hips to provide volume. It's just very sleek and stylish looking, and I really like the illustration, how they've paired it with a coordinating hat. Here you have an earlier pattern. This was definitely from the 1940s. I think I kept a copy of this to myself too. I think I had it in a larger size. I love these. These are just blouses that you can make with either short or long sleeves. You can make them with a collar or with a bow detail or with a little cravat. You can have a placket going down the front or make it without the placket and have the lapels. Just very versatile, very practical. I like it a lot. This is a lovely button front shirtwaist dress with a large collar. You've got darts under and beside the bust to shape it, and Dolman sleeves or capped sleeves that you can make with an optional cuff. It is pleated at the front, or maybe those are tucks, it's hard to tell. And it's got really large pockets too. And I'm always a fan of a button front dress just because they're so much more convenient to get in and out of than fiddling around with the side zip. And then this is one that you're going to see in all of my New York pattern hauls, I think, because I have this in many, many sizes. And it's just a bolero or jacket pattern, which has dolman or kimono sleeves and a few different closure methods. You can either have it be double-breasted at the low waist, you can have a high collar and button down the center, or you can have it where they don't overlap at all. So lots of different options, a really cool topper that would be perfect for any 1950s wardrobe. So those are it for the size 10s or the 28-inch bust patterns. Most women's patterns weren't even produced in size 10. Size 12 was typically the smallest. So these are definitely a rarity to see, probably because they suited such a small percentage of the population, but it's nice that they do exist for the people who will fit them. And now we'll go into the size 12s, which are the traditionally smallest women's patterns available. So right on top here we have a nightgown or negligee pattern, which again you'll be seeing in pretty much every haul. I actually have multiple copies of this in most sizes, so if you're after this one, I have it in sizes 12 through 20. But this is, as I said, a nightgown or negligee pattern. It is partially cut on the bias to create that fitted effect, and it has a low V-neck, and then it's shaping underneath the bust to provide volume to it. This is a summer blouse pattern that you can have either with a haltered top or a wrap top with a notched V neckline. And you can have this with either a pointed waist or the wrap waist that they show there. So lots of options. I really love the illustration for this. The ladies just look so happy and they have really great hair. This envelope is worse for wear, very water damaged to the point where it's basically been bleached of its color, but it's a really cool design. It's got this high sort of fitted waist, and it has a seam at the center to really cinch that fit in, and that seam actually extends down the front of the skirt, so it's all neatly tied together. It's got this interesting shaped patch pocket, and then it's got gathering underneath the bust. It actually has this beautiful little button detail over the shoulder, which is great as well. So if you can look past the flaws with the envelope on this one, it's a really amazing design. This is a very cute, very simple pattern with cap or dolman sleeves. It barely has sleeves at all actually, and it sort of creates a very flouncy ruffled effect over the shoulder because of the way it is gathered at the neckline, and it's shaped below the bust with darts, and it is a square neckline with a very full flared skirt. And it looks like the skirt is a partial circle skirt. I don't see any seams in it. And then you've got a little jacket or bolero to go over top of it. This pattern is amazing. I have this one in a couple sizes as well, though I don't remember which ones. You've got a very full pleated skirt and then a halter style top. And this is a really, really interesting style. I don't know if you can see, but there's a seam here. So this is a continuous portion, then there's gathers or pleats underneath the bust to create that shape. I'll actually zoom you in so you can see it. How interesting is that? I've never seen anything like that in a pattern before. It's just very unique. And then this version, I think, though much simpler, is very, very flattering and striking with the contrasting binding. This is another one I have in a bunch of different sizes. This is an earlier 50s pattern. You've got dolman sleeves that are either elbow length or short. It buttons to the waist and then has a lightly gathered, sort of lightly flared skirt and a V-neck. Just very casual, very simple, very easy to make and wear. Here's 757. We just saw this pattern in a size 10. So again, you've got those blouses with the plackets down the front and a few different color options. Speaking Speaking of options, this is a two-piece dress pattern or blouse and a skirt pattern depending on how you want to look at it. You've got a full flared skirt with a inverted box pleat at the front and then a button-down blouse. You can make this with cap or off-the-shoulder sort of sleeves, or you can make it with the elbow-length sleeves. This was another pattern that we saw in a size 10 earlier on with that contrasting yoke and that lovely optional collar. And speaking of duplicates, this is another one of those bolero or jacket patterns with a few different closures. Then we have some shirtwaist patterns. These all button down the front, I think, which I've already said I'm a fan of. This one on top is a little bit worse for wear, but it's a lovely pattern nonetheless. It has tucks or darts underneath the bust, and then the lines of those continue onto the skirt, which is just slightly flared. It's got large pockets and dolman sleeves and a really large lapel as well. And I love how they've shown an option for this being trimmed with ruffles. And based on the illustration down here, I don't know if you can see that, it looks like this is a relatively loose dress, and then it is really cinched in with that tie or belt at the waist. This is a very similar pattern that once again has dolman sleeves, so this has an option for an elbow length sleeve, and also has optional wing cuffs in addition to the collar, though the collar for this one is a bit more understated. And this has a lightly flared skirt, probably a partial circular skirt, and is just fitted with darts as opposed to multiple tucks. So very similar looking, but still a very different pattern when it comes to tailoring details. Another dolman sleeve dress pattern. This one, however, has a much straighter skirt, not nearly as flared, and is probably from a much earlier period, which you can also tell by the fact it has a smaller number that's from an earlier year. So I'd say this is late 1940s. And this has either a square neck or a lapel and collar. It buttons down the front. It's got this notch detail in the skirt which creates a pocket. And then there's some gathering above the pocket to form it nicely over the hips. Really, really lovely design. One that if it was in my size, I'd probably keep. Back to the 1950s with this pattern. This buttons all the way down the front. It has dolman sleeves, but it barely has sleeves at all, honestly. It just has a slightly extended shoulder. It has a flip-out collar. It has a triangular shaped yoke that you can make out of contrasting fabric as they've shown here. Another button-down dress, though this one they have clearly dressed up the ladies in the illustration more, so I don't think this is intended to be quite as casual as a house dress. They made this with some really obnoxiously large buttons too, which I'm actually a big fan of. This has a lovely scalloped lapel and dolman sleeves. It's shaped with darts above the waist and tucks below the waist, and just very simple, very sleek, very pretty. This pattern buttons down the front as well and has a very full skirt with some pleats. It's sort of hard to see the style lines of this one because the prints they've chosen for the illustration are so bold, but I can tell from my view that this has dolman sleeves, either elbow length or short, with optional cuffs, and it's got this sort of high waistband right here that extends just underneath the bust, and then above it is gathered to create volume above the bust. This is sort of similar in terms of its style lines. That has that piece that goes right underneath the bust. It's a little bit easier to see in this illustration, though this envelope is worse for wear. This is a wrap style dress though, so it actually wraps around the front, and I believe that is where it opens, and it has a double-breasted sort of double button front, and then it's got raglan sleeves and some gathers extending down from that to provide volume over the bust. This is a beautiful halter style dress that buttons down the front as well. It's got a sort of squarish, straightish neckline, though you could easily alter that to be a sweetheart neck. The skirt is quite full with pleats at the front, and I imagine has pleats at the back too. And then you've got this bolero with flare cuffs that you can make to go over top of it for a bit of modesty. This is a duplicate from the size 10s as well, that dress that I said you should put ice cream cone pockets on. So now two of you out there have the option to make that a reality. This is another V-neck pattern. It's got a full pleated skirt and it has dolman sleeves that you can either make elbow length or short. It's got a very low, sort of wide V-neck, and it's got little tucks or pleats extending down from that neckline to provide the volume across the bust, which is just an interesting twist on how you usually see these dresses tailored. And they've shown this as a very casual dress that you could wear while picking some flowers or as more an evening ensemble. This is a really cute house dress. This one has short or shorter sleeve options, has very large optional pockets, and then it's got this scallop detail down the front and a scoop neckline. And I believe this is a button front closure because the buttons extend relatively far down, though they don't continue all the way to the hem, which means you don't have to make as many buttonholes, but you also don't have to install a zipper, so it's sort of the best of both worlds. This is a suit pattern, a relatively fitted skirt, and then just a lightly tailored top or jacket with either puffy elbow length sleeves or short sleeves with a cuff. You've got a collar slash lapel going on, and then just buttons down the front. Pretty basic. This is sort of like a suit pattern, but I believe they'd call this a two-piece dress. So it is a blouse and a skirt set that are intended to be worn together. It looks like for this one you can wear the blouse or the jacket over top or tucked in, as they have shown here. And this is just a pleated, very full skirt, and then a dolman sleeve jacket or blouse that is fitted with darts and buttons down the front. This is a similar sort of pattern, except this has a flared, probably partially circular bias cut skirt as opposed to the pleated one we saw previously. The blouse for this buttons down the front as well, but it has more of a placket to it. And this has optional flare cuffs, which are very exciting. Actually, the other one has optional flare cuffs as well, but I just like this one a little bit more. It's from a slightly earlier period, I'm assuming based on the numbers, so it's got a slightly sleeker silhouette that I just tend to prefer. Speaking of sleeker silhouettes, this one is very slim cut. It has some gathers over the hips and a basque waist. It buttons to the waist and has a collar. And it has either a flip out lapel or a notched collar, depending on your preference. You can make this with short sleeves or you can make this with long cuffed sleeves. It's a really nice, very dignified looking design, sort of the dress equivalent of a suit in terms of the style lines. This is sort of like a suit pattern as well. You've got a jacket and relatively slim cut skirt with pockets. Actually, I can't tell if this is a skirt or if this is a dress with a V-neck. It's sort of hard to tell. I do really like the jacket for this though. It's got raglan sleeves and it's sort of asymmetrical or double-breasted, though it only has a single button. And it's shaped with darts at the hem, so you could get that to fit really nicely over the bust. And then it's got long sleeves with these little flare cuffs. Just really lovely design, and I believe I have this one in quite a few sizes as well. Here's another two-piece dress pattern. So this is for a skirt. I'm assuming this is a wrap skirt, and it would actually close at one of these sides with the tabs at the waist, but it's hard to tell from here. Again, I can't show you the style lines or the piece layout on the back because this has already been packaged for sale. This is a lovely flared skirt with large pockets, and then you've got a button-down blouse that is fitted with darts under and to the side of the bust. And you can either make this with or without sleeves and with or without a collar. We had a very similar pattern to this earlier. This is another just house dress that buttons to the waist and has an inverted box pleat at the front and very large pockets. And it's got a yoke slash placket slash shoulder detail that you can make out of contrasting fabric if you so wish it. This is a really pretty house dress. I actually have a pattern very, very similar to this in my stash. Like, I'm wondering if they are the same pattern and it was just repackaged under a different name. But this is a wrap style dress. It has a tab detail at the neckline or the yoke, and then it's got these roughly sort of flared sleeves. It's shaped with gathers underneath the bust and has large pockets inserted into the side panels. And it's sort of got a flared shape to it, but it's relatively slim cut. This is another button front dress, but this one's a little bit sharper than some of the other ones we've seen. It's got a slimmer cut to it and is either asymmetrical or double-breasted, depending on your preference and how many buttonholes you feel like making. And then you can make this with elbow length or short sleeves and has a lapel and collar. Then lastly, another button dress, that this one buttons down the sides. You can make this with a high shawl style collar, or you can make this with a low scoop neck. I really like the button detail on this. I just think it's really striking, and I love how it is mimicked over the shoulder as well. Though I'm not sure if those are actually practical buttons, or functional buttons, I guess. And it's just got a really lovely flared shape. And that, my friends, is it. I really hope you enjoyed this video and seeing some of these beautiful New York pattern designs. If you're interested in purchasing any of them, then I will have the link to my Etsy shop where they will be listed down below. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll subscribe and stay tuned because I have all of these New York Company patterns. These ones are size 14. These ones are size 16. These ones are all size 18. And I still have some pants patterns to list, some larger size patterns to list, and 100 or so kids patterns to list. So if you're interested in seeing any of those in a little bit more detail, I will definitely be posting videos on them as well. So subscribe and stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you then.